After making a cycle for animals or humans, using it in a real shot can sometimes be a challenge. In this video, I'll show you the best way to attach it to a motion path and use it within all your real shots. This applies to humans, to dragons, and to dinosaurs. Anything you want to do with the cycle can be done with this method. Now the first thing you want to do is make your actual motion path, your curve. Using a CV curve tool, go into top view and draw the path for your first creature. This can be anything you want. I would advise using lots of different points. You can always delete them later and then you can edit them quite easily. But having more is better than having less. So I'm making two curves of this shot because I've got two creatures. So I'm making my second curve. So after you've made your second curve, what we want to do is now attach it to the creature, which is the easiest and the basic step. So with the motion path box open, you want to make sure you select your first character, and the base of the actual character, the master control, must have no incoming connections. Make sure you choose the right axis, so the front axis here is Z, and you can attach it to the path. And then of course set the other character and do the same thing. The key thing is the path will travel for the length of the timeline, which sometimes is good, but without actually editing this, it can look quite janky and weird. So if I play this right now, you'll see what I mean. If I just play this, it's fast, it's speeding up, it's too fast, it looks really bad, right? There's no real control. Now there's a few reasons for this. The first one is of course that the spline of this curve is, as you can see on the left there, it's actually a pretty weird shape. So let's set this to tangents to linear to see a more realistic example of a running speed. Okay, so now it's evenly spaced. Now to select these tangents, by the way, you have to click on the master control and go to the graph editor. Now the first thing we could do to make it seem more natural is to adjust the curve itself. So we can make this more of a natural path, thinking about who's chasing, who's fleeing, and what's going on in the action. This is again down to your individual shots, making sure it actually makes sense for the motion that the character is doing. This process can take quite a long time, so don't be disheartened if it's something that takes over 2 hours, an hour or so, just to get the perfect curve, the perfect motion. This is a back and forth process. You can always delete some of your curve points, just to make it easier to manage. Like I said, having more is better than less at the start, but now we're getting into the details, we can clean this up a little bit. So in my example, the Spinosaurus is chasing the Raptor, so I've got to make sure it makes sense with the, I guess the speed and the direction, and how the Spinosaurus would turn being a heavier creature. And then let's say it's still too fast, we can actually increase or decrease the speed of this whole animation. We select both of those curves again, go to the graph editor, and shift them along in the timeline. This way the whole animation is now slowed down. It takes longer to reach the end of the curve. If this is a production shot, of course you might have some more difficulty, but for your own personal hobby stuff, this is a completely fine method to do to make this a bit easier to manage. So here I may go to 300, just try and get a bit slower. So now it's a bit more natural, but there is still some issues. So the issue we have, if you zoom in a little bit, the feet are sliding, right? So this is for multiple reasons, but one being of course that the animation is too fast still. But we can kind of fix this. So what we need to do is try and make sure the contact poses are actually consistent before they peel off the ground. So there's two methods to do this. The first method is to basically select the geometry, and then we're going to duplicate it, Control D, and you've got to find the contact pose. So there's the contact pose. So Control D, duplicate the geometry, and then you're going to unlock that geometry, break connections, and then you're going to go to Unparent at the bottom, and then you can also just freeze all the transforms and delete the history. We have now a duplicate of this geometry, which we can then use as a template for the contact pose. But however, I use a plugin which is one click, make ghost pose, and it's a lot quicker. I'll link it down below. So now we go to this curve in the graph editor using the motion path curve, and we're going to match this contact pose with the pose which is peeling off the ground. So select the master control, go to the graph editor. I'm going to set a key in this curve. And we'll drag this key down to match this contact pose, so where that leg is peeling off. Cool, there it is. I'll go back to the other contact pose now, the pose where the template is, which is I think 5 or 6 frames earlier. So then we go back to the other pose, and you're going to match this pose as well. So now set another key when it contacts, cool. And now bring this up to match this pose again. There we go. So now we know this tangent, or this angle of the curve, is the correct curve for the speed of my shot. You see this linear? So now what we can do is we can match this for the whole curve. So bring this up. Make this go linear maybe. If it's going to run at full speed, it's not going to be doing anything else but linear. It's always going to be linear. And go in and bring this down. I added some keys earlier to help with some of the corners to slow it down. But right now, we don't need to worry about that. We want to make this the same speed consistently throughout the entire shot. Bring this down again. Matching this single step pace. That's the main point of this. We're going to get as close as we can to perfect contacts before we start editing keys of the dinosaur. And then when we play it back, you can see that the speed is a lot more natural compared to the gate. The Raptor hasn't been changed yet, that's why it's running off too fast. If I then change the Raptor 2, you'll see what I mean. So the same method, I select the geometry again, I make a copy of the contact pose, I then zoom forward to the peel off pose, and I drag it back using that motion path curve. Now a trick you can do when it's a very linear curve, instead of changing the entire timeline, you set this to linear, you delete all the other keys, and the first or the last key, and then you go to the curves, and post infinity offset with cycle, and then offset with cycle. This way it maintains the same tangent angle throughout the entire shot. So I put this together now, you see what I mean? It's kind of pretty much even with the spacing of the feet. However, there is still some sliding which we can fix now using some of the animation itself to make it lock down to the ground. So the method to use with no plugins is to make a locator and snap it to the feet. So then you can scale it up to make it bigger and name it if you want to. And we want to constrain this locator to the foot. So the locator is a child of the foot. So the real constraint with translations and rotations, and apply. Then what we can do is now with the constraint on, we can bake the simulation, key it on ones, so make sure you turn off smart bake. You want to key this onto ones. Essentially what we're doing here is making, I guess, mocap data. This is 1, and you can leave everything else the same and bake this down. This will look quite scary to people who haven't used this type of information before, but basically every single key will have a frame on it. So every single frame will have a key, like this. It is a bit scary, especially with long keyframes. But don't worry, it's easy to manage. Now you can see all the information from the foot is baked down for the entire timeline onto this locator. So now what we need to do is to switch this back and now make the foot the child of the locator. So we can basically do a simple parent again, or a parent constraint again, but the other way around. This way, all the information from the locator is controlling the feet, but using the world space, which means we can edit this independently of any other influence. So the motion path or the route of the dinosaur, this will not affect the feet. Now I have a plugin for the same thing, by the way. This does the same thing, maintain offset, make constraints, bake on ones. It's a plugin. I'll link this down below. It does the exact same thing I just mentioned. Let's bake this down as well. And it's baked down again, and there all the information is on that locator for each foot. And now what we can do with this world space information is we can edit this. So let's go down to 50 frames, make it a bit simpler. Now you see with the sliding feet, you can see here why it's sliding, because the keyframes are not the same. So we can delete keyframes in the middle, and then make the start frame and the peel off frame the same. You can middle mouse drag and make a key, or you can use Tween Machine and just do 100% of the previous frame. Basically make the same pose and the same value for the translations for the contact pose and the peel off pose. And you might have to edit some of the other controllers too, like the rotations, but this is where the animating really starts, and you're going to clean up this shot. So you can go in basically step by step, and it does take a long time, especially for long shots, but this is really how you're going to get the best results in the quickest amount of time. Now, I don't really have a finished version yet because I'm still working on this shot, but this is the method I would use for any type of long run for creatures, for humans, even a walk cycle for a human in a standard, background shot. The same method also applies to dragons, though of course it's a lot easier because dragons don't have contact poses. But you can just attach the dragon to the motion path and you can edit the wings to flap left or right depending on how it's turning. But you can see here now that the way I'm editing this curve, it means that there's no real sliding. The dragon, or the dinosaur, sorry, is going along the path at the correct speed. And the only issue with this shot right now is because of the tempo and the feeling of the animation itself. The dinosaurs. The dinosaurs feel too weak, they feel a bit slow, but that's issues with the animation, like I said. So I can fix this in this shot, or a better thing I wish I could do is make a new cycle with an angrier pose, an angrier sort of tempo or feeling, and then use that cycle as the basis for this motion path. But in terms of the motion path itself, this is the workflow you use. You've got to go basically step by step, cleaning this up. And I can assure you, compared to taking 2 or 3 days to do this by hand, this method, while tedious, is a lot quicker than making every single step by hand key animation. I hope this was helpful, and please do subscribe and follow the channel. I'm making kind of an advanced animation technical series right now, using tips and tricks I use most days at work. If there's anything else you want me to see or want me to make for you guys, please do comment down below, and please do subscribe and like this video. Cheers guys, I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.